Hey, it's Nicole. Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is Carol Schultz. She is the CEO and founder of Vertical Elevation. She's a podcast host, an author too, and she works with executive leadership. She is a consultant and coach and helps them work through having a talent-centric approach to their organization. What does that mean for you and your business? Are you focused on your talent or something else entirely? I can't wait for you to hear her 30 years of experience as we dive into her real, no-nonsense approach. Let's go. Hey, if you're an entrepreneur who usually fast forwards intros just like this one, this is the podcast for you. Carol, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, both of you.
Hello, Carol.
I'm Matt.
Carol, we love to start the show the exact same way every single time. How would you finish this sentence? You know you're an entrepreneur when?
You actually make the decision to start spending money, even if you don't have it and need to borrow it to build your company.
Oh my gosh, that's when
Instead of trying to do all this crap yourself and doing it the cheap way. That I believe is the biggest difference between entrepreneurship and a hobby job.
Yeah, I think you're right. Somebody recently mentioned something to me with this badge of honor. They were proud and there was some shame. It was that thing called DIY. She said, I'm a DIYer. I do everything myself. And it sounded like this badge of honor, but then next couple sentences out of her mouth was like, I know I really shouldn't. I know I'm leaving money on the table.
Carol, I mean, we've had guests in the past that talk about that badge of honor of, I took out every credit card I could while I still had a job and gainfully employed and used every bit of my credit cards and went all in.
You have to really be willing, and not just willing, committed. Okay, there's a big difference, between a commitment and a want. You have to be committed to going into debt, like up to your you-know-what, and really believe in what you do. My wealth manager once said to me, so do you have a plan B? I'm like, nope.
No net. This is it.
This is the commitment.
So I was going to ask, is there a story there? Is there a time you've like, well, I'm taking it on, so this is what it means for me?
Yeah. So I've been out on my own in business since January of 2002, just over 21 years now. I had left the search firm that I started with that trained me after just over 9 years. And I really looked at them and thought, what's the value they're giving me for the amount of money I'm giving them? And, it weighed the other direction. So when I came up with this idea that I know we're going to talk about, which is what it means to be a talent-centric organization, it was in 2008. I had this epiphany. I just could not emotionally make the trip one morning out of bed on the corner and into my office. And really. And I just kind of really had this meeting with myself and said, what's the problem here with the entire industry? And I realized that recruiting was broken. It's always been broken, but the internet has exacerbated how bad it is. And the other thing is I started my coaching, training, and development work in 1998. So I'd been at that for 10 years and recruiting for 16 at that point. Both of these jobs are low barrier to entry. Anytime you have a low barrier to entry job, any idiot can say, oh, I'm a coach. Oh, I'm a recruiter. And what ended up happening was I had this epiphany. I started interviewing a ton of executives that I knew, from first-line sales managers and other managers on up to executive level at, third, fourth, fifth level, depending on the size of the company. The theory that I had as I started asking these questions started to prove out to me. And I went back into search work because I thought, I'm going to have to spend a lot of money to make this work, right? To my comment. People think they can do it all themselves. And it was never successful getting it off the ground. And then I finally decided, made the commitment to start spending the money that I was going to leave search work. And I was going to have to basically go broke and be in a lot of debt and put in all the right structures so that the money would start to finally roll back in, which it did.
So tell us, what businesses do you own? Who are you serving?
My business is Vertical Elevation, and I have a team of people that work with me. It's a service-based company, and what I do is I go into companies and I help them become talent-centric. So what does that mean? It means going in and doing discovery with the executive team. I have a current client who's got me not only interviewing her executive team, but the chairman of the board and some managers below the executive team. I have a series of questions. That's only about 7 or 8 questions, but usually other questions come up in that conversation that when I'm done with all these and go back and listen to all my interviews, because I don't ever take notes when I'm interviewing, it's really important to be 100% present with that person. And if I'm busy taking notes, I'm not present and I'm not retaining. A lot of people don't realize that. So I record my meetings, and what those meetings and interviews give me is where are the gaps in alignment? Where are the gaps in alignment in their vision, in their business strategy, in their leadership, in all sorts of different areas, in communication. And, if I look at things from a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being we are not remotely aligned, like we're just a disaster, to 10 being, man, we are in that boat and we are rowing and we are getting from point A to point B and winning every race that we're in. So it just tells me where those gaps are in alignment and what we need to do to close those gaps.
Yeah.
And that could be a number of things, doing communication training. And usually if I do communication training, my preference, depending on what I hear in discovery, is to do that as a group with everyone. If it's a small enough company, we'll do it with the entire organization.
So first of all, Matt, I think you and I both worked at companies that were on that 1 scale. What do you think? That were only on that 1 or 2?
Oh, yeah.
I'm so interested in right away, how are people coming to you and what are the words that they're saying? They're not saying talent-centered right away.
No.
I think it's that whole, what they think that they want, right?
Right.
That you give them what they need. So
it's what they think their problems are. They may say we have a recruiting problem. We have turnover. Well, recruiting problem and turnover are actually 2 different things.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. It really just sort of depends on who I'm talking to. But usually it's something around recruiting, retention, turnover that often has them come to me and say, something's not working right. Once we get into that conversation, recruiting's actually not their problem. It's a symptom of their problem, which is misalignment. There's a story in my book. I was speaking to somebody I have known my entire career. This was in 2009. I'll never forget it. And we were having this conversation about this process. I wanted to talk to him about it, see what he thought about it. At this point, I had originally met him when he was a first-line sales manager, and he was now way farther up the food chain. He ultimately stayed with this company north of 20 years. We started talking about the actual recruiting process and, how does your company know what kind of salespeople they need, for example? Because this is where he got his start, and this is where I got my start recruiting in the sales organization. And he says, well, we know what we're looking for. We know what works for us. And I said to him, and I quote, how do you know that person wants to come work for you? Crickets.
Oh, yeah.
For several seconds, he finally came back and he said, I don't know. That's a really good question. That is just one illustration of the problem with companies. They just didn't think about it.
Okay, so what's your story? We have the aha, but let's go way back, way back. What gives you the confidence to own your own business?
Yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur, I would say, from the time I was a kid. And I think that's not uncommon among other entrepreneurs. I did a year at Kansas University right out of high school and then decided in my brilliant and clueless 18-year-old way that I was going to move to Montana and meet a cowboy. So I ended up doing my next 4 years of school at the University of Montana in Missoula. My first summer up there, when I was 19, I worked in Glacier National Park. And I decided I was going to throw a big party. I went to our chef at the lodge that I worked at in East Glacier, and I bought a quarter of beef and, went to the bar and did this. And we basically passed the word around everywhere, and we charged people X amount to go, and I broke exactly even on it. Which is, I don't think I went into it to make any money.
Yeah.
I went into it to have fun. And, that's pretty much sort of the history of my life, doing things like that.
As somebody who has planned lots of events, I will tell you, breaking even on the first one is great. Usually the first one's a flop. It's the next year that you make some money on it.
I mean, literally exactly even. I'm like, ooh, phew.
Oh my gosh.
I like that, in its own entrepreneurial sense.
Yeah.
No matter what it is we do, at least for me, if I can't have a party while I'm doing it,
right.
Let's throw a party while we're doing this.
Did you meet the cowboy? I have to know.
I realized that really wasn't what I was looking for at that point.
Just checking. I think that covers my question on what would someone be surprised to learn about your early days.
Well, you get to work with a lot of great companies, it sounds like. What's the most difficult thing about your own business?
I would say the most difficult thing is people don't realize this is an issue. So they hire leadership people, or they hire people to teach your recruiters how to recruit, or whatever that might be. I am not aware, and I have looked high and low. There may be somebody out there. I have yet to find anybody that does what I do. And it's disruptive. And whenever you disrupt, it just doesn't happen overnight, and people are resistant to it. What I have discovered is I need to have founders who are super self-aware. People who are not self-aware don't think they have a problem. And that isn't to say that people who are self-aware don't have blind spots. We all have them.
Right.
right?
Right.
But people who aren't self-aware have, I believe, far more of them because they're not doing the work.
As you were giving that little tidbit about a former company you worked with, that level of an executive who had that aha moment where he's like, oh my gosh, I don't know if those kinds of people want to work for me. I'll go down a path of vulnerability here. I've been in the real estate industry in some capacity and working with broker owners and companies for now going on almost 20 years, technically. But
You're old, man.
I know, seriously, I'm thinking about that. And every company I've worked with has what they'll call their 5-star candidates, or the people that in their mind, this is the kind of person we want to recruit. And sometimes they're very, very identifiable things about the person, about their personal lives, about their income streams, their past history. I'm asking myself, did we ever once ask that person if we're the kind of company that they want to come work for? So help me understand that. And even in our organization, what would that look like then? What should I be doing different? Because I can tell you right now, we never once did that.
So when we think about recruiting, for example, so we've got a
Right.
talent strategy, we're starting to put that together, and it's time to write the position description for it. I call them position descriptions. Some people call them job descriptions. I think job descriptions are just basically a litany of bullet points and don't tell you a whole lot. So in that kickoff meeting of asking 40, 50 questions about this particular job so that we can now write this position description, one of the questions I always ask is, does the person we have now just described want to come work for us? Why or why not? First of all, I don't believe there has ever been a time that I've asked that question in a search where somebody has said, oh yeah, I've thought about that all the time. They don't think about it. They don't think about how long do you want this person to stay with you? Part of your talent strategy. Nobody asked that question.
I don't know.
But
I
wouldn't
think about
most
that.
corporations,
I
I
think
think most corporations would say, I mean, and maybe this is going back to the dark side, as Nicole would say, the people we've worked for in the past is, well, forever, right? I mean, as long as we can.
No.
I
don't
think there's these like,
say that.
maybe I want to say forever, but I'm saying, nobody wants to say, oh yeah, this is a 3-year position.
But
I don't
some
think-
positions might only be a 3-year position, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you may be hiring somebody right out of school, a lower level thing, somebody to be an analyst or whatever that might be. That position is not a position where they're going to continue to grow and flourish. So you
Right.
may only expect that person really to stay with you 2 to 3 years. But then if you look at hiring some C-level position, your chief revenue officer, head of sales, that person, I mean, do we really want that person leaving in 2 or 3 years? You know how much that's going to cost us?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Right.
it's not only
Love
going to
it.
cost us in money, it's going to cost us an opportunity cost. And it's also going to cost us in potentially losing people. You must
Yeah,
look
absolutely.
at what is a period of time that this person should stay with us so that we really make the most of that financially, emotionally, whatever those things are. Now, if
Right.
they stay longer and it still makes sense, well, yay. It doesn't mean
Right.
we want you to stay 5 years and out.
It just
Right.
shows you that I was not working or my brain is not even working as a talent-centric organization yet, because I wasn't thinking about the entry-level position. I was going straight to a higher level position
That's
going,
right.
I want them there forever. I can't afford for them. That's the first thing I was thinking about.
You don't even want that person there for forever.
I know, but I'm saying I wasn't even acknowledging, hey, this is a 2-year gig. Like someone's
Right.
going to either leave us or we're going to have to promote them. I'm not even thinking like that. If we're not doing it across the board as a organization, then there's a big problem there.
And what you just identified was a blind spot for you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where asking the right questions
Mhm.
of people starts to ferret those things out, right? This is a great amount of the coaching work that I do with people. Think of driving down the road at night, your headlights are out, it's pitch black, and you run into a boulder that basically runs your car off the road, totals it, whatever. If you had been able to see that boulder, you might have made a different decision about what to do about it. Go around it, stop, get out, investigate it, whatever that is. That's a blind spot.
Mhm.
So once those blind spots come out into the open, now you can sort of put a structure in place to think, okay, how do I now go around that so it stops limiting me?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's what really your comment was, just a limitation. It was a limitation on your thinking.
Right. Or I just don't move to Montana. I stay in Chicago and there's no boulders in the middle of the road. Just throwing that out there too.
Instead, you'll get a pothole.
So
Exactly.
there's
let's
potholes
for that.
bigger.
there's
Yeah.
some other-
Oh my gosh. Fantastic. I love it. I love
Yeah.
hearing about all of these. Love hearing about some common mistakes too. Can you talk to me about some common mistakes and or speak into some of the layoffs that we're seeing since January and we're going to continue to see?
It should not be a surprise to anybody that all these big firms overhired in COVID. This is what happened in 2008 and 9. happened
Yeah.
for a different reason. You have to be accountable when you go to work for a big public company that when the economy goes south, and it does about every 10 or so years, people
Yeah.
have very short memories, which shocks me. When
I
you go to
agree.
work for a large publicly traded company, guess what's going to happen when the economy starts to slip? They've got shareholders and investors that want money, and that can't happen if their stock price drops. So what is the best thing to do? The best thing to do is take people off your payroll. So now your balance sheet looks a little bit better. I'm not a financial analyst and I'm not an economist, but this is not rocket science.
Mhm.
It's a simple way to look at it. Sure, there's more complex things around it. And a lot of these people go to these big companies for all those fabulous perks and benefits. I believe Google started it. And I believe they did it for really some fairly simple reasons. I'm not omniscient. This is just my own perception from the outside. They gave people all these amazing perks and benefits,
Like the napping pods.
napping pods, food anytime you want it. You're taking your dry cleaning in. I believe they did it as a manipulation to keep people there more hours. That is just my feeling about that. I've read recently that a lot of these companies put this stuff in place. I read something on Insider, I think it was last week, about a woman that basically she was hired and there was no work for her. And she was getting paid money not to work. And I'm like, what? The assertion is that these companies are doing this in order to keep these people from working for their competitors.
Oh,
I was horrified when I read that. But the bottom line is there's a lot of shenanigans that go on in companies, especially these big companies.
I don't want to cite the wrong book, but I read a book on tech startups and it was like the big four, the big five or something. One of the interesting factors in there they talked about was the Google like built-in restaurants, unlimited food, come eat whenever you want. And a very interesting factor that they showed, it was like something stupid, like 67% of people did not leave the building to go to lunch as opposed to like what it was before. Well, what was interesting was they said, being in the Bay Area and everything, if people left for lunch, on an average, they'd be gone somewhere between an hour and like 5 minutes to like an hour and 19 minutes just to go somewhere, grab something, bring it back. Now, if you go do that and then try to re-engage the brain back into work mode, the loss of productivity compounded then because now we've left work, we're outside, it's gorgeous out, we go get food. Now I'm back in my office and now I've got to get re-engaged back into work. And then it was something like there was like a 2 to 2.5 hour gap of productivity lost. Here's what was interesting. They said that on an average, if someone leaves their desk for 18 and 19 minutes, bathroom break, walk around for a few minutes, grab some food, walk right back to their desk, the amount of time compounded on the 18 and 19 minutes they were gone was less than an hour of loss of productivity. So what did they gain, if you think about it, in productivity for their employees? An hour to an hour and a half of productivity across the board.
It's not just Google, though. I mean, Walgreens has dry cleaning, and the credit card companies that are in Delaware would have where you can like see your kids, watch them from your computer if you needed to check into the daycare. Like we're all trying to figure out how we can do more with less all of the time. And not that all of these are bad decisions. I don't want to see that people can't go out and grab a bite to eat because of peer pressure or work pressures. But I think that it is a little bit of smoke and mirrors. And I feel like that's what I heard when you said all these perks and benefits. Sometimes people need to really pay attention. What are the perks and what are the benefits? And what are they going after? I had terrible experiences in big companies. So then growing SmartCookie Media, it's been what really matters to me, thus is going to show up in the business, right? I make the choice to hire entrepreneurs, which, spoiler, it scares me sometimes. Like I want to hire and work with entrepreneurs because they're little strategists in their own right all the time in their world. The cover of your book is people rowing a boat together. My team will say, oh, it's you at the front. And I'm like, no, man, I'm over here on the side, like checking out, making sure everybody with me. Okay, got everybody. Because at any time, they can turn their own check, nice and easily. They could go work somewhere bigger and have this perk or that perk. They also get the toxic environment.
Nicole, you're exactly right. And please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Google's the only one doing this. I just believe they started it.
Yes,
yes.
They
were like the one everybody uses as an example of all of this. Right? And other companies followed suit because they thought, well, we've got to give that to our employees.
Yes.
But here's the reality. It goes right back to what we talked about and to your point, Matt, which is what does the person want that we are trying to hire and trying to attract? Like what's important to them?
I guess my question, and this is just my brain trying to process this right now. If they say it's not just money, it can't just be about money. So then you have this huge kickback of all these other things, pet insurance and walk your dog in the middle of the afternoon. I'm not criticizing those companies that do it because some of those benefits are amazing. My question is, if it's not those things and it's not just the money, I mean, is it really come down to this vision alignment, the idea of these values like Nicole was identifying? Like, if my people buy into the vision and the values that I'm involved with, they're not going to leave me because the other media company down the road offers the pet insurance. I mean, is that what we're talking about?
Let me take a stab at what she might say. Because
Okay.
I feel like you and I met, we just talked about this like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Maybe it was thumbing through the book and it's just like osmosis. It hit us. Okay. The answer, and she's already said it, but she didn't say it this blatantly, so I'm going to try.
Okay.
Is you go and you ask them. You go and you say, well, who are we trying to attract? And if we want, I'm going to call her LT. If she knows who she is, she knows who she is. If we want an LT on our team, we just go ask her. Not as recruiting, just being like, hey, we're looking for someone like you. What would it take? I bet you she wouldn't even know right away if she was asked. But anyway, that's my view is if we ask who we want, we're going to find out the answers.
You're right.
Let's hear the
and
expert.
This is one of the, I'd say the 3 principles of what it is to be talent-centric, which is it's a talent development strategy from recruiting to succession and succession beyond the C-suite. So what that means is, how are we recruiting? How are we retaining? And in retention, part of retention is, what's it going to take to keep you here? Is it employee development? Is it leadership development? Like, what does that mean? What do you want to do with your career? What do you need from us that's going to have you stay and have you be happy here?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really not complicated. So
does it ever come back to the math, Carol? Because as a marketer, I'm always just following the money, usually. That people make their decisions, good and bad, when they're following money. And I remember basically writing my own severance check when I said, I got a $500,000 team over here that you don't even let us put our foot on the gas pedal. Like you're holding us back. I'm pretty sure that's what the ink that dried was like, well, she said it. But if it was exactly that, it was like, if you're not gonna, then the team is going to get bored. They're not achieving. They're going to leave or they're going to put out half-ass work. Now, today, if I had wanted to stay, I might have said, you know how much money you're losing by not putting to work the $500,000 machine? Like, let's extrapolate over that 3 years and how you're going to have to hire and how you're going to have to recruit. And maybe if I said, well, that's about $3 million that you're going to just lose. Maybe there might have been a different decision, but I feel like somebody's not paying attention to that other side until they read your book. They're not paying attention to all the money that could be lost.
I mean, this is conversations I've had with people for years. Do you actually know what it's costing you when you have that turnover? And the reality is companies are going to have turnover. That's a reality. No one's going to stay with you forever. Probably not. You talk to a company and any firm that has customers and ask them, so what's your customer churn? Well, our churn is at 20% right now. And it really should be somewhere less than 10%. Employee churn is the same thing. We want to get to 95% retention. So what does that look like? It's like a math problem.
Yeah.
What needs to happen? What do we need to put in place to see that through to fruition?
One spot in the book that I really did find interesting, I love that you went into these statistics about I think you referenced them as high potential people. And you talk about the fact that 67% of promotions tend to be coming from these high potential people, at least in these organizations, it seems like. But yet 15% are only satisfied with the results that they get with it. Am I saying that correct?
I can read it if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's true that 67% of companies take the time to identify high potential leaders. And why is it that of those 67%, only 15% are satisfied with the results? The other point that you loved, Matt, to follow up right there was up to 40% of internal job moves made by high potential people end in failure.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, the numbers are stacked against the old way of doing it, basically, is what you're identifying right there alone.
One of my employees sent me the most recent episode of Freakonomics Radio, why there are so many horrible bosses. Both of you need to run out and listen to this episode of Freakonomics because they actually talk exactly about that, which is one of the things I thought, we talk about this in my book. This is so awesome. I don't remember what the figures were that this researcher did. They interviewed like 5,000 people. And what ended up happening was they found out that those high potential people, so your sales superstar, for example, that gets often promoted into management, they're the biggest failure. As opposed to people who are lower performers in sales tend to be better managers, better leaders. Now, I don't remember if she talked about why that might be. I would make assertions on some of those things based on over 3 decades of seeing things that don't work. The ones that aren't satisfied, I believe, because primarily companies put people into these roles and give them zero training and development.
So for instance, I've always had this thing about pattern versus potential. Where do we get patterns from? From developing our skills, having permission to either fail or develop or be mentored or coached and develop these patterns over a period of time. The problem is too many times we, and I'm going to say we as in myself, we put people into certain roles or capacities, and then we expect them to do and perform at the same level that we are. I mean, how in the world do we expect people to just do that randomly without the support and coaching?
And oh, by the way, not everyone is meant to be a manager.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Let's just
Right.
really be clear about that. It is
Right.
not in everyone's DNA. Okay. It's just not. So we have to determine, why do you want to go into leadership? I really want to know, why does somebody want to be a leader?
Mhm.
And we need to look at the qualities they have. There's a story in the book somewhere about an old buddy of mine who he now consults because he doesn't want to work full time, but he's been a CEO.
Mhm.
And at this particular point, he had been promoted to vice president of North American sales for a $2 billion tech firm. And his revenue responsibility was like $1 billion or a little over $1 billion. He takes 5 of his best first line managers and moves them into second line management. And he did say to me, he got lucky because only one failed.
Oh,
I mean, he said, I was lucky, only one failed. His aha moment inside of that, and this is what's so brilliant, is that it's a different skill set to manage individual contributors as it is to manage managers. The guy who failed, his team was like number 1. And then the minute he moves him to second line management, the guy was a complete flop.
Wow. So what is that difference?
The difference is that individual contributors, if you have stars selling on your team, they don't need a lot of management. They don't need a lot of handhold. Then when you move up the food chain to the next line and to the next line, the style of how you manage a manager has to be managing them to manage their people. And that is different.
Hey, it's Nicole. I'm just popping in the middle of your episode. Yes, for just a pause. Can you hit pause and share a comment or share a review with us? It would mean the world to the team that puts this together week in, week out. We love to hear directly from you. We know you're listening out there, and we appreciate that for sure. But if you would share us with others by offering a review on what the Serial Entrepreneur Show means in your business, that would mean so much to us. What is one of the key lessons you've learned as an entrepreneur? Maybe it's something you find yourself saying again and again and again.
I know what I'm doing is necessary. I just need people to start to have that aha moment so that they'll pick up the phone and we can have a conversation about it. Rather than just burying my head in the sand and quitting.
Yeah, I feel like your work, all of your work is real work. I don't mean to misuse the word real, but I feel like the real work for you, like you have to help people be self-aware, which is what you started off this entire conversation with. They either are or they're not. And if they're not, they can't see it. Too many blind spots, too many boulders and potholes and all the other
They won't even have a
things.
conversation.
They won't even turn on the headlights. And so it's almost like, man, the real work is how can you help others be self-aware? But you can't. It's in the title, self-aware. It's really difficult to do that for them, beg them, lead them, push them into water.
Or they have to be open to becoming self-aware. I'll tell you a very quick story. I had a CHRO reach out to me about working with their leadership team. The CEO at that point happened to also be the founder. They were replacing the prior CEO that had replaced him. So he stepped back in to be the CEO. And she said, the problem is our CEO and our CFO are not open to coaching. And I said to her, then I can't work with you.
Yeah.
Right? She says, the level below that would love coaching. One of my friends said, you should have just taken the job doing the lower level because you'd at least have money coming in. And I said, I guess maybe I could have said to her, let me just make this really clear. I'm happy to work with your lower level. It will make them better leaders. But what's going to probably happen is they're going to become so self-aware that they're going to say, F this, and I'll be out the door.
I'm
That's
like,
it.
exactly.
right,
Yep,
yeah.
they're
Why
on there.
am I wasting my time here?
That goes back to your point about having an organization that's vision aligned. So that has to start at the top
It has to.
and go to the bottom. Otherwise, you're going to hit a pain point. You're going to hit a ceiling. You're going to hit something with some of your employees. They're going to call you out on it probably too, right?
Yes.
Like,
Oh, by the way, just saying your vision once or saying that we're going to create a culture of feedback once is not enough. You have to reinforce it and you have to show people and you have to communicate it and keep working on it because it takes time. I had a discovery meeting yesterday and the woman says to me, how do you know people are going to be completely open with you? Really great question. I said, oh, because I preface these conversations with why we're doing it. And really it's a feature benefit thing, the benefit for them to actually be open and honest with me.
Right.
Because the CEO is committed to the feedback, positive and negative.
Right.
You holding back from me is not going to do anything for the company. It will
Right.
not help us get to where we want to get.
How would you define entrepreneurial success?
I believe entrepreneurial success is having the right team of people working for me so that I can jump in the living quarters and haul my horses around the country to really fabulous places to ride and be able to work from the road like that.
Awesome. So what we learned there, Nicole, was she did not go all in on a cowboy. She became the cowgirl instead.
I've been riding
Forget
since
those
I'm
guys.
a little girl.
Tell us, Carol, what's next for you? Do you have a new idea percolating? What's going on next?
I always have little ideas that come into my head, and I'm a firm believer in not multitasking.
Yeah.
Because multitasking takes your concentration away from what you should be doing.
Is there anything we didn't ask you that you wanted to tell us more about? Did you want to plug the podcast?
Yeah, the podcast is called Authentically Successful, Founders and CXOs on the Journey from Startup to Success. Primarily, I interview founder CEOs, but occasionally the non-CEO comes along. And it's all about the entrepreneurial journey. What are the challenges? In my pre-interview calls, I really want to be clear that people are going to be authentic. Don't try to cover up the dirty stuff. Ask any salesperson in the world, you'll learn more from your successes or failures. What's the answer they give you?
Yep.
Every single time. Carol, such a blast chatting with you. Thank you so much for
Super
your
fun.
time.
Hey, it's Nicole, and that's the end of the interview. But stick around. This is the part where Matt and I break it all down and give you our favorite takeaways. Listen in.
So, Matt, we just wrapped up with Carol Schultz. What a firecracker. I really enjoyed the energy she brought to the room today. Like, I just felt like she was here with us right in the room, and she just would speak frankly, and it was a lot of fun. More of that, please. Off the top, one of my first takeaways was when she shared, you're an entrepreneur when, and she talked about how that you really invest in or possibly even go in debt. I'm not encouraging everyone to go into debt up to your ears or something, but that when you're committed, I thought that was really powerful. I had a client recently mention to me how she was proud of being a DIYer. Like it was this badge of honor. But then in like the next couple of sentences, it was, but I know I'm limiting myself. And so hearing Carol even tell her own financial advisor, there's no plan B. This is plan A, B, and C, basically. That was really powerful to ask all of us, how committed are you?
And so many of our listeners understand that commitment. They understand that feeling you get like in your gut. You're just like, nope, let's go. Let's just go, right? You don't even question it. You know it's the right thing to do. Because you know, basically.
I love it. What do you got next?
Okay, for me, top to bottom. I mean, in the show, I had this aha moment where I wasn't even thinking about the entry-level person or somebody we were trying to bring into the organization at a low level. I mean, the first person I was thinking of, if I'm investing this kind of energy and time into trying to figure out who's the right fit and who do we bring in, I'm thinking higher level management. I'm thinking executive. I'm thinking what I would say irreplaceable. Like we don't want them ever to leave. I fell victim to exactly who she's identifying in the book, probably, which is if you are not going top to bottom, talent-centric across the board, you're not going to achieve the results that she's trying to get organizations she works with too.
Yeah, I agree. Last one, in all of the ways, I want to remind everybody that this is no longer high school. When you want the answer, you can ask the person for it. You can ask them. And that's the takeaway. And it's not just for hiring or recruiting when you want that top star talent. When you're like, how do we get those people? Like she talked about that have you considered, do they even want to work for you? The next step right there, you wondered what it was. Like, okay, what do we do next? And it is ask them. Like it is find out what are the things that motivate them, move them. It will be different from person to person, but I bet you star players probably have a theme and it's a matter of just asking them and not asking them in like, hey, I'm recruiting you and like, well, let's sit down and let's have that offer conversation. It's just hey, we're trying to find humans just like you.
Shocking that the marketer goes, you could just ask them, right? Like, just go to all of them, just ask them because that's really where you're going to find golden nuggets, so to speak.
And they'll use their words against them later on. That's the marketer talking.
Yes, exactly. Great
well,
stuff.
Folks, you know what we always say, if you're listening,
Keep listening.